Hello and welcome to another episode of Charles Weekly Parti. I'm back and happy to be here, but before I get started with the interesting things I have for today, let's roll the intro. Okay, so I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I'd be taking off Easter weekend, and I do hope that you enjoyed the little break because I definitely enjoyed having a week to sort of relax and step back. And surprisingly enough, was incredibly busy as is. And to make matters even better, I did end up losing my voice around that time. So if I hadn't been planning on taking the week off, I probably would have had to anyway. So funny the way things work out sometimes, but I hope everyone's doing well. Know that there's all the fun stuff going on right now, things going around, springtime allergies, all the fun. So hope everyone's doing well on that end. I can't, without going into too much detail, I know I got hit with a couple of things, so took me a little bit, but I'm past that now. So with Earth Day happening last week, I wanted to mention a project that sort of tied into being a little bit more clean and green. And one of the things that's considered a little bit more clean and green is taking public transit. So I decided this week to talk about the Austria bus station. So this Austria bus station was designed by Stenkogler Egner Architekten, and it is located in Wels, Austria. Full apologies if I'm not pronouncing anything right. So what makes this bus station so special is that at a first glance, this doesn't necessarily look like your traditional bus station. And I think I talked about a different one last year that had a little bit of a different amenity set to it. But for this bus station, there isn't an indoor area like there was the previous one I talked about. As a matter of fact, the simplicity of this bus station is that it is simply a covered area in which to gather and wait for your bus. So, what really makes this so special? Well, if you think about it, waiting for your bus, depending on where you are, would really determine what your opinion is on it. Because if you think about it, there are some places where, sure, it's a nice, pleasant experience waiting for your bus. Other times you're in a graffiti-filled little thing that barely provides you shelter from the elements and has windows about as clear as cloudy toilet water. And I will say the experience on that end will definitely play a big part in whether or not the public transportation is something that people actually want to take. Because if you think about it, your first introduction to getting on to a bus is where you're waiting for it. And depending on your waiting space, like if you're in a very nice waiting room, you're almost, let's say for a doctor's appointment, you're in a nice waiting room. Maybe you're not worried about waiting for the doctor. You're comfortable enjoying whatever magazine, or maybe you're looking at something on your smart device. But doing something that's sort of enjoyable and passing the time a little bit quicker, it's almost a shame when the doctor comes or nurse comes and says your name and invites you to come behind for your appointment. So, thinking about that makes you think about how a bus station would work as well. So looking at the bus station, you have a couple of interestingly shaped masses that are supported by a variety of circular poles. And the circular poles are some slanted, some straight. So what that really does is it gives a different set of character to it. And it, rather than feeling like you're trapped in this little area waiting for a bus, feels like this is a nice little pleasant spot to sit in. Oh, bonus points that it's right where the bus is going to pick you up. So personally, if I was waiting for a bus outside, this would be an ideal spot because it's covered but not fully enclosed. So if it is a windy day, you'll have that little bit of a problem. But you have greenery, you have little benches that I think, according to the architects, were designed to allow people the ability to sit and gather without feeling the need to consume. And just having little informational screens around as well. So what's really so special about, so I guess, why am I talking about this particular bus station? Well, continuing in looking at it, you have the hard part about any bus station is coordinating different things, and when you have more than one bus that might be stopping at a station at a time, well, it gets a little bit more complex. So, actually, I think I got my facts wrong. Three different sized roofs are spanning the areas across the square, and because of the way they're built, do provide shade and passive cooling. There's also roof greenery and wood on the top of each of these roofs. There are also a couple of cutouts in the roofs, which seems a little bit unorthodox at first, but having those little openings allow for having other plants and things inside or underneath the roof, sort of, while also making sure that they can get the water they need to survive. Now, another thing that really strikes me about this is I mentioned I was doing this as part of an Earth Day theme. And part of the piece on this is that bus stations and many other things do need to be thought about in more of a green perspective. And what that means is you're thinking about it, making something a little bit more natural focused, giving it more of a feeling of being nature connected. And realistically speaking, that can be very helpful for making people feel more at home. Like I think I mentioned healthcare example earlier, and I can go sort of back to that, where having a view of nature and wood tones and all the things that feel natural helps out a lot in recovery versus just being able to stare at a concrete garden and feeling like you're in some super sterile environment. While yes, you need the sterile environment, you also kind of want a little bit of a connection to nature. Because I can tell you right now, if I'm stuck in a hospital bed, the last thing I want to be looking at out of a window is something that isn't interesting. I like the idea of being able to look out the window and see the tree branches rustling in the wind, and just being able to enjoy that. And taking that sort of concept over to the bus station, you have an environment where you're not being separated from the cityscape. You still feel like you're part of what's going on here. Not at all. You still have all the excitement going on around you, and you have the sounds, the smells, everything you're not separated from. So you still feel like you're part of the city and you're part of that particular area, but you're sheltered from the elements so that you're not terribly unpleasant waiting for your bus. Pedestrians also benefit a lot from the redesign of this bus station because the peripheral areas in the bus island have been made a little bit larger, and because of that offer a little bit more space for people around. And the architect's description is actually quite interesting here because, quoting from them, the mouth of one of the most frequented shopping areas in the city can be recognized by the continuation of the pavement as a carpet. And that is really an interesting concept because most people, when you think about pavement, the last thing you're thinking about is a carpet. Is in your mind, carpet is this nice soft thing that makes a place feel more warm and inviting. So I can guarantee you, no matter how nice of a hardwood floor you have or a vinyl look-alike hardwood floor, you're always going to feel a little bit more relaxed in a carpeted environment. But to think about asphalt as a carpet was an interesting thing to say, but it made me think, why would you be referring to something where, if you think about asphalt, maybe asphalt on or nearby a playground or something, you may think about a time in elementary school where you tripped and skinned your knee on the asphalt, and you're thinking, well, that carpet has nothing common. But actually it does. And I'm saying that also because if you trip and fall on carpet, which I've done before, wearing shorts, you can also get a little bit of a friction burn on your knee. I've done both. And what I think the connection here is that a carpet is considered a way of being able to conjoin multiple spaces. So if you walk through a building or a home or anything, and you notice that the flooring stays the same, which you'll traditionally have more in a home where when you're in certain areas, the carpet flows across rooms. Having that it shows that even though you're going through different wall openings and maybe going into different spaces, they're all connected. And the carpeting here in the form of asphalt does the same thing. It's connecting this particular square, this bus station's gathering spot, with the rest of the city and the country as well, because asphalt, if you think about it, is one gigantic carpet connecting different areas around. That's, for a lot of people, the connection between here and there. And if you want to think about it, I know I'm recording this in America, if you think about it, there is a very, very large piece of carpet called the road system. And it connects several spaces that otherwise wouldn't really seem connected. In the good old days, where you had horse and buggy or had to walk places, you had dirt roads, yes. But it was still a sort of connection. Those roads were seen as the bridge between here and there, where you are versus where you want to be, or it can help make you feel connected, because if you think about if you have to walk through woods and use a compass to figure out where you're going, it makes it feel like you're really relying on yourself. You don't feel as comfortable with it as you would on a road, because if you're on a road, it will eventually connect, or there's another connection to another road, and you can use that connection to get where you need to be. So that carpeting of asphalt provides a little bit of a comfort level in making you feel like, bringing you into the sense that you feel you're not lost. It makes you feel like you're part of, air quote, civilization, and it makes it so that you feel at home, or that you'll be able to get to where you need to be without great concern. The last thing I want to note about this bus station is how it looks at night. And the reason I say this is because nighttime, that cover of darkness, can make some places feel more at home and some places feel less. I mentioned earlier that you have this big discrepancy between the nice shiny bus station and the one that looks like makes you feel like you may not be entirely safe there. How the bus station works at night is a very important component of it, because at night there are plenty of little bus stations I've walked by at night and said, you know what, I really don't want to sit in there, because it doesn't feel inviting, and when something doesn't feel inviting, you don't want to be in there and you don't feel safe there. And I really have to credit the architects here for this bus station, because the bus station at night is, I'd almost say almost seems a little bit more inviting than it is during the daytime. Because underneath some of the bench seating around the planters, you have LED strips that are able to make it sort of feel like it's floating, but the light also provides that sort of invitation to them there. Like we always talk about, if you're going through a tough time, you call it darkness, but you say, hey, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So light is really this force that makes people feel safe and comfortable. The other place where light is used is around the roofs of the bus station. So going around the organic shapes and the cutouts in the middle, the roofs are all lined with LED strips to also give it that feel of, hey, here's this area that's nice and lit up. It's there for you. It's covering you from the elements, and here's the outline of where it is. So it feels like it's a spot where you want to go instead of a spot where you don't. And personally, if I had to wait for a bus, I would really love to be waiting at this bus station, because to me, just looking at the pictures, it feels like a spot where I'm happy to sit down and wait. It's not a spot that makes me question whether or not my wallet is safe in my pocket. It's a spot that makes me feel reassured that spending time there isn't coming at the cost of my personal safety, but rather as a benefit to what I am doing. As much as I would like to keep talking about this bus station, I'd like to switch gears and staying on a sort of green theme about something I've mentioned a couple times before, which is the USB-C requirement being set in place by the European Union. Now, the European Union had been considering putting in a rule where you would have to have a USB-C port to charge devices, to standardize cables and make cable waste less of a problem, because right now there are a lot of cables that get thrown out each year. So how to go and reduce that waste is a very big and important question. And one of the ideas was standardizing phone cables, so if you transfer from one device to another, you can just use the same cable without needing to say, oh, I don't need this cable anymore, and just decide to throw it out. But as one could probably guess, Apple wasn't too thrilled with that news, because they've been using their Lightning port. And each of the phones that they have, I think starting with the iPhone 5, has been using Lightning port, and there's a little bit of pushback saying that, if we do that, then these cables are all going to be useless. So to some degree, I do sort of see where the EU is coming from. And I think a little bit of standardization could actually be beneficial, because then if you have that USB-C port that's common on everything, then to some degree, you're a little bit more safe and secure with the idea of having the device, because you know that if you forgot your charger, that someone else who has a phone who happens to have a charger, their charger is going to work for your device. So a little bit of a hypothesis had been forming that when the EU did this, that Apple is going to be a little bit defiant and create a portless device. It looks like in the latest revision of it, the phones will not be, only certain devices will be allowed to be portless. So I think the example that they used was having watches or other small wearable technologies be allowed to go without the port, which would make it so that Apple couldn't say that the standard Qi supporting or the MagSafe, which I think may or may not support Qi. Have to do a little bit more research on that, but having that sort of wireless standard be able to say, oh, it supports wireless charging, so we don't need to worry about supporting USB-C. And it looks like the EU just put a little bit of an end to that idea. And personally, that had been one of my greater concerns about having a portless device, because I get the fact that it provides some bit of a benefit, but nothing really beats wired transfers. If you need steady transmission for most of anything, you're using a wire. So personally, I prefer the idea of, I like the idea of wireless charging, but I also like the peace of mind that I can use a cable to do it. I also know that wireless charging has little bits of optimability pieces where if the antennas aren't exactly lined up, it isn't as fruitful for whoever's using it. So I do like where Apple has gone with their MagSafe. I think it's actually a really cool feature about their devices, but I do think that they should shift to USB-C phones because it's on most of their other devices. I think it'll make everyone's life just a little bit easier, and I don't get why they're trying to kick it down the road, but especially if they're saying, hey, most of the things are turning wireless now, that transition's been steadily happening. If it goes full USB-C, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact, and I think that'll make life a lot easier for a lot more people. Sure, don't get me wrong, the Lightning connector has great advantages, and when it was released, USB-C was still in the works, but having that reversible sort of port was a nice thing. I do have a device that has Apple's older 30-pin charger, and trust me, I prefer Lightning over it 100%. But those are my thoughts on turning to USB-C, and I think that's actually a good direction to go in. And I'm finding out the more thing that as I've gotten more devices, the newer ones that have USB-C charging make me feel a lot more comfortable, because that means it's all one port. If I forget a cable, I'm not doomed. That standardization feels a little bit more comforting. And sure, maybe in the future we do need to shift ports, but right now USB-C is a good place to be. Before I wrap up this episode, I do want to quickly touch on the fact that graphics card prices are still falling. And for the first time, I'm happy to be saying that I saw a graphics card available at, I think, just 100 or 150 over the MSRP. And seeing that was one of the best things, one of the greatest feelings I've ever gotten. Because if you remember, back at the very first episode of this podcast that I recorded, I was talking about the GPU shortage. That was over a year ago. The fact that I am able to say now that we are getting close to being back to where we should be on graphics cards is absolutely outstanding. It means that people aren't going to be punished for wanting better performance, and right now the price drops are really being led by the fact that there's a greatly increased supply now, as some of the other manufacturing endeavors are getting back up and running and getting just started up. Having those capabilities coming in and the increased supply is really good, because what the chain reaction, I said that this would eventually end. The chain reaction is this: as the supply is increasing and the prices are going back to where they should be, it means that people can get the graphics cards at a more reasonable price, which subsequently means anyone who's trying to scalp the card is not going to be in as good of a situation, because, well, let's face it, you can't sell something for $600 if someone next to you is selling it for $400. So because of the way this is going, cards are falling and we're getting close to being back to where we should be. So with that being said, I'd like to wrap it up for today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Closing thoughts are just having that light at the end of the tunnel is a very, very nice thing, and I'm glad to say that we're finally getting to the end of what has seemed like a very dark tunnel. So, speaking of staying in the light, if you liked the light from this episode, please subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. You can go to anchor.fm/weeklyparti, where you can listen to all episodes of the podcast as well as interacting with voice messages. Also, while you're there, you can support the podcast, which helps out immensely. If you're using Apple Podcasts, please be sure to leave a review, and you can always see the action on YouTube. So, take care. I hope you have a great week. Glad to be back, and have fun. Roll the outro.